Well, hey everyone, welcome back into the Pressing On podcast. I'm your host, Richie Reeder, and I have the honor of leading our organization in serving hospitalized families. One of the many ways that we serve hospitalized families is through this podcast, so thanks for listening. Our goal here with the Pressing On podcast is to amplify voices of perseverance and highlight the journey of hospitalized families so that everyone who listens will be encouraged to press on through tough times. You can learn more about my family's hospital and transplant journey, as well as take advantage of all of our free resources and Pressing On programs on our website at pressingon.org. For the latest Pressing On news, volunteer opportunities, and program information, be sure to subscribe to our email newsletter at pressingon.org and follow along on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube to stay up to date on our journey as we serve hospitalized families together. Just search for Pressing On PGH on most social platforms. Well, today we have the opportunity to sit down with Mike and Charity McKinney, who are fellow parents on the journey of pediatric transplant. Their sweet daughter Annabelle was born in 2016 with a rare metabolic disorder called Propionic Acidemia, a rare condition in which the body is unable to process certain proteins and lipids. Mike and Charity have persevered through much with Annabelle, including a rare diagnosis, liver transplant, adrenal insufficiency, food allergies, anemia, and managing her feeding tube at home. They've been very open about the fact that Annabelle has autism and is nonverbal, but she uses an AAC device to communicate and is quite proficient at communicating her needs. The McKinneys live in North Carolina, but traveled to and from the great city of Pittsburgh for Annabelle's transplant and care. This sweet Southern family has an encouraging pediatric transplant story of faith, acceptance, and perseverance that I think will inspire you. Let's welcome the McKinneys into the Pressing On podcast. Well, hey friends, welcome back into the Pressing On podcast. I'm your host, Richie Reeder, and I'm here with my friends, Charity and Mike McKinney. They're fellow parents on the journey of pediatric transplant, and their sweet daughter, Annabelle, who was born in 2016 with a rare metabolic disorder called propionic acidemia, a rare condition in which the body is unable to process certain proteins and lipids. Mike and Charity have persevered through much with their daughter, and we look forward to hearing their story today. So, guys, thanks so much for joining the Pressing On podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, we're looking forward to learning from your journey and being inspired by your journey of perseverance. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you guys met, where you grew up, and all that good stuff of how Mike and Charity came to be?
Okay. Well, I grew up outside of Charlotte in North Carolina, and then I went to college nearby. And then after college, I ended up moving to Greensboro. And that's actually where I met Charity. And so I'll let Charity.
Yep. And I grew up in a small town, unincorporated community called Union Cross, right outside of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Went to school in Raleigh, private women's college, and then kind of moved back home, started teaching, and then, met Mike at church. And
Awesome.
that's where we met each other.
And how many years ago was that you guys met?
About 17.
Yeah, 18 maybe. 2006. Yeah, 18.
Yeah, about 18.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I'm always curious, like when couples meet and they're attracted to one another, like I find like early in the journey, like there's things that happen in your lives that as you look back, you're like, oh, that prepared us, for this. But looking back, like how do you feel like your lives, whether it was in your families of origin or when you guys first got together, like are there things that you can see now in your life that looking back, you're like, wow, like that helped us and prepared us to proficiently care for our now 7-year-old daughter, Annabelle?
Yeah. I think infertility, like when we got married, and then we struggled for a long time to have children, and so I think that process alone, I think, kind of put us into a situation where we were, we're still very thankful for what we did have, and to continue to press on from that. But I'll let Charity kind of speak to that aspect of it.
Yeah, same thing. The infertility years were really, really hard for those 5 years, wanting to try to have a child. And I didn't always handle it with grace. And I had a lot of anger and bitterness during those seasons. But as I look back, I can see that had God not led me through that season of infertility, I don't think I would have handled everything we dealt with Annabelle as well, because I needed to do that wrestling with God before that, instead of having to struggle with all of that during everything we had with Annabelle. And I think about the passage in Joel 2 where he talks about like, I will restore to you the locust or the years that the locusts have eaten. And those were like my locust years. And God just really used that to help, me rely on really trusting and surrendering to him so that we were prepared for that. And also, he really instilled in me a sense of organization and being very type A. And I feel like that has really helped me manage everything with her care.
Yeah. I really appreciate you guys sharing that. I mean, that's a very vulnerable detail of your story that, one of the goals of the Pressing On podcast is to be open and honest and vulnerable and real and raw. And so leading off with something like that, I know that that's going to speak to another family that's listening that's like, hey, I want to listen more because these people are super open and honest. As you look back at when God blessed you with a daughter and all of those initial emotions, and then also met with the diagnosis, and, could you guys walk us into the story of what that was like when, you've persevered through a lot with Annabelle, but take us back to those very early hours, early days with the diagnosis, and then also with when you decided to prepare for transplant.
So, I mean, I would say that when we first found out, she was just about 3 days old, and we went to the hospital because her temperature was really low. It was like 95, and she wasn't waking up, and so we took her to the emergency room. And but the whole process, though, we kind of looking back on it, you see how everything was orchestrated. God provided for all that. In every single detail, like even just going to the children's hospital as opposed to the local hospital, which was maybe about 30 minutes away, and so that saved us a lot of time there just by going there. And so we were there all night, and we were young, we were new parents, like we didn't know what to expect. We thought that she would just need fluids, and then we'd go home, and then everything would be okay. And then things just never, like, they kept looking for stuff. They kept wanting to check on some other things, and it kept going and kept going. And luckily, early that morning, the next morning, which would be Friday morning, we had one of our elders from church was there. He came by, and he was with us when they began to tell us that she needed to be observed, that they're looking for some more things, and that this was fairly serious. And so he was with us in that moment, and I don't think we grasped it, but he did, and of the severity of it. And then we got moved to another floor where they began to try to figure out what was going on. And later that afternoon, our pastor had come by, and at that point is when they told us that she had a metabolic disorder, and that they were going to need to do a
emergency dialysis.
Yeah, dialysis and surgery, and to get the ports put in. And again, we were in there, we were stunned, we were in shock, and luckily he was there to kind of walk us through that and walk with us through that as well. And so we get that diagnosis, and then they had all that done, and then she finally woke up again on Sunday. So we were going from Thursday night to Sunday, and she finally wakes up and from that coma, and then she gets up, and we end up going to Duke on Monday, and there we began to learn more about that specific diagnosis. And so that was that one, and we were once we got to Duke, we were being more educated by it. But again, it was one of those things where we kept trying to seek hope. Once we kind of realized it was Propionic Acidemia, we began to look and research and look at those other stories, and there was some other hopeful stories of kids that had done really well, and so we kind of held on to that with hope, and we were trying to seek for anything like that we could find. And
I remember asking the nurses and being like, "Oh, it's just diet management. We just need to manage her diet." Like we were just in shock and denial of, and didn't really understand the severity. We were like, I mean, I remember when the doctor first came in and said, "Y'all may have been the same way." I'm like, "What's a metabolic disorder? I don't even know what that is."
Right.
And just the shock and how scary and terrifying everything was. And honestly, I would say even more so than the dialysis part of the waiting in the hospital all day to figure out answers and figure out why are all these nurses around her crib trying to draw blood and having a hard time, and why are there so many people in and out of this room, and what is going on, because they hadn't really been communicating, or if they had, we had been up for about 3 days straight after we had just had her. So it was very exhausting, and I can remember just trying, that sickening feeling in my stomach of trying to we had a friend bring us lunch that day while we were waiting, and just trying to force ourselves to eat lunch because it was just so scary. And it was almost a relief to me when we finally had a little bit of an answer and they could go start treating it, even though it was still scary, like dialysis on a 3-day-old. But the waiting was so hard.
I know that your story, led you guys to Pittsburgh because that's where we met. But for our listeners that are dialing in right now, connect your caregiver, support from Duke to how'd you guys get to Pittsburgh? What did that journey look like?
Yeah, I think I contacted, I can't remember if it was the OAA or the PA Foundation, like one of the two. That were like, if you're going to get a transplant, Pittsburgh's the place to kind of go.
Sure.
The fact that Duke had not done a transplant on a kid with her disease, they have since done one, but at the time, back in 2017, they had not. We had just heard good things. We watched a few of the YouTube videos about the hospital. We were like, this is a beautiful place. We should really go check it out. I remember requesting information and calling, and I think someone got back to me the day of when I put in like a request form, and they were super nice and answered all of our questions. So at that point, that was when we decided, okay, let's try to get up there over Mike's spring break. Because we couldn't just take off any more time for work. He had already taken off a lot of time from work. So we waited till his spring break that following April to go up there to visit.
Do our evaluation.
Yeah. Now I know, before we get into the specifics of the hospitalization here in Pittsburgh, the transplant team, definitely want to touch on that. But I know that the Children's Organ Transplant Association was beneficial to Annabelle's transplant journey. They're one of our podcast sponsors. We're obviously very thankful for their organization and all that they do in the fundraising space. But what did your interaction with CODA look like, and how are they helpful in your transplant journey?
I mean, they did a great job of kind of helping us see that we needed a team and allowing that team to do the work, and for us to sit back and take care of what we need to take care of with Annabelle. And we had an amazing team that they trained. They gave them all the resources they needed, and they were able to go out and raise the funds for that. So put together fundraisers and all that.
And for us to not have to be involved with it. I'm a control freak. So it was nice to like let one thing off, because we really had so much on our plate. That was just nice to not have one extra thing and that was my first fear when we started looking at Pittsburgh. I've never lived outside of North Carolina before, if you can tell from my accent. And my first fear of the transplant was, how are we going to, and they told us, like, be prepared to live here for 3 to 6 months. And my first thought was, how in the world are we going to go live in another city for 3 to 6 months? We don't know anybody. What's going to happen to Mike's job during that time? How are we going to be able to pay for things? How are we going to be able to keep our house afloat back home? Our dog, all the things. It was terrifying. It was a lot of anxiety with all of those worries. But CODA definitely helped alleviate all that, because between them and our insurance, I don't know if we had to spend a single penny while we were up there, unless it was for something like a souvenir that we wanted for ourselves or something. But there was, we really were well provided for by those funds and by our private, luckily having very good insurance as well.
That's wonderful. For our listeners that aren't familiar with the Children's Organ Transplant Association and all that CODA does, the process that Mike and Charity were just describing is they desire for families to focus on the child. And so they want loved ones and friends and family to surround the family, run different events, spearhead the fundraising initiatives so that the parents can focus on the child. And so that's a beautiful thing of people coming alongside of you and CODA training them up to do the fundraising. So I absolutely love what they do. And thanks for speaking, on their behalf there as well. Maybe take us back into, your journey of perseverance and Annabelle's transplant specifically. What did the time look like, when you came to Pittsburgh, the surgery itself, the time in the hospital, the Ronald McDonald House, her recovery? I believe that that's when we met, but what did that time look like for you guys as a family? Walk us through that.
So when we went up in April, we absolutely fell in love with the hospital, just the way it was designed, with so many parent features in mind. Like, I think what really got me was the cabinets from the outside that they can get the trash and the linens from the outside
Yep.
without having to go into the room.
They thought of everything. Didn't even need to open your room door to get it.
I know. And then the Ronald McDonald House being connected to the hospital was huge because, like I said, when we were at Duke, we were a mile away and we had to take shuttles back and forth. And even the one in Winston-Salem, that one was like, you could technically walk it, but it was a pretty far walk. So most of the time you would drive back and forth. So to be able to have the hospital right connected, and we got to stay at the Ronald McDonald House during our evaluation so that we would kind of know what it was going to be like. We knew kind of what to pack, what the rooms would be like, what the laundry facilities were like. We knew that many of our meals would be provided. That's the other great thing, is they provide so many meals. So even when you're inpatient, if they have a meal from like 6 p.m. to 7 p.m., like one of us could run over from 6 to 6:30 and the other one run over from 6:30 to 7. And then that's one less meal we have to pay for or use our CODA funds for. So, and then our pre-transplant coordinator, Sarah, was amazing. And our post-transplant coordinator, Katie, has been absolutely amazing as well. So we just fell in love with the team. And when we toured the transplant unit, we're like, they have a whole recovery unit just for transplant recovery. Like, that's crazy. We loved it. We fell in love. Yep.
Hey friends, I'm Reagan Reeder, co-founder of Pressing On, and I love providing leadership to the organization as we uplift, resource, and coach hospitalized families, many of whom are on the journey of pediatric transplant. This season of the Pressing On podcast is sponsored by our friends at CODA, the Children's Organ Transplant Association. You can look them up online at coda.org. CODA helps children and young adults who need a life-saving transplant by providing fundraising assistance and family support. They're the trusted leader in supporting transplant families financially for a lifetime. CODA has helped raise more than $125 million for transplant-related expenses since 1986 and have seen approximately 2,400 CODA patients transplanted successfully. CODA is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, so funds raised to help meet the needs of transplant patients are not considered income for families, and CODA's services are provided at no charge to transplant families. As the mom of a transplant recipient, I'd highly recommend their services because I've seen firsthand how CODA's compassionate care and financial guidance has helped our family since my daughter's transplant before, during, and after her transplant in 2017. For more information on how CODA might assist your family financially on the transplant journey, head to coda.org. That's COTA.org.
Yeah, like how did the surgery go? What were complications that she experienced? What did those hours and days right after the transplant look like for Annabelle?
Yeah, so I mean, at this point, by the time that happened, we had already been in the hospital quite a bit. And so we were starting to kind of learn a little bit about how things kind of operated. And one of the big things I think you got to know about the hospital is that hospital has its own time and it's slow. And when they say we're going to do this, in a few minutes, that means like in a few hours. And then, you got to wait for the test results and then it's just a whole long waiting process. And so I think we're starting to kind of pick up on that at this point. But overall, though, the surgery went pretty smooth. We got the call early, probably around lunchtime, and that we had a match, which we really didn't think that we were going to get a call that week because she had just come off of a strep throat or an ear infection.
Yeah, she had
an antibiotic.
Yeah.
So we really thought that she were going to get a call. And we actually had a CODA event actually planned that day. And we were actually getting ready to go to that. And then we get the call. And at first, like I said, we didn't really think this was going to happen. And they called back and they said, no, we're good to go. And everything started rolling. And then at that moment, we knew that it was real, like this is happening. And so we had our bags packed. We had already done that, ready to go. And so we put everything in motion, and me and Annabelle got on a plane, and we went straight there, and they picked us up and took us to the hospital. And then Charity and her mom drove separately and met us there, but they were there before they took her back for surgery.
Yeah.
So they did all the pre-op stuff, and they went in for surgery. I want to say it was probably around, I want to say 10 o'clock.
10,
Yeah,
10
around
sounds
10
about
o'clock in
right.
the evening. And I want to say that they were finished early in the morning.
6 a.m.
Yeah. And so we were just in the waiting room. We happened to be in the waiting room in the surgical center, and there was nobody in there. It was really just us in the waiting room. We were just kind of sat there all night, and finally they came in and told us that everything went smoothly. And so, but you know, in the recovery, she had some issues with what was she had
her lactic acid.
Yeah, kept going up.
Yeah. And that caused some
and there was some
struggle
concern,
for me.
and they kept trying to chase other things just to make sure. And finally, once they started getting some food in her, I think that it started to help nutrition. And so that began. I think once that happened, she began to start improving. And up until that point, we were a little nervous because things were not getting better. And so, but the initial part of it went pretty good. And then I think that once we kind of got the lactic acid under control, things began to kind of start going in the right direction at that point. So she was in the hospital, 2-3 weeks?
Yeah, I think she was in the PICU like about a week. We were then we got moved to the recovery floor, and about 2 weeks post surgery, she got a small blip of rejection, which sounds scary, but it was caught early. So they just had to do some steroid infusions to treat that, to calm things down a little bit. And then that put us there like an extra week. So I think all in all, it was only 20 days that she was inpatient, which was really, we counted our blessings, because we were expecting a lot more complications than that, because they even told us that our PA and MMA kids tend to have more complications. But she actually did really well. And then we got discharged, back to the Ronald McDonald House. But we had to stay in the area for another, oh goodness, at least 3 months. We were there going back and forth from the hospital. Started out like twice a week for labs and clinic appointments, doing some outpatient therapies there as well. And what really kept us in Pittsburgh the longest was she had EBV issues, which, if listeners don't know, like, she acquired EBV from her donor. And so she did not have EBV antibodies. So 1 week we would treat the EBV, and then the next week we would treat that by lowering her steroids. And then the next week the liver numbers would be up and the EBV would be down. But then when then the next week the EBV would be back up, and we kind of did this balancing act for several months before they felt like it was safe enough for us to come home.
I appreciate you guys sharing that, because I mean, a lot of families that we, get to know, they're like, what's the transplant journey like? And I always just use the illustration of a roller coaster, because there's going to be ups and downs. And like you guys just outlined, like, there's going to be complications at times. And like, for the transplant journey, that's normal. Not that we want things to go poorly for our kids, but to just expect 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or however many bumps in the road, that it's a roller coaster, and you got to hang on for the ride. So kudos to you guys for persevering through all of that. I'd love it if you could, to kind of catch our listeners up on, how Annabelle has grown and developed and how she's doing today. Because I mean, you got a sweet little 7-year-old on your hands.
She's actually 8 now.
Is she 8? Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, she just turned 8 last month.
Okay, so I'm a month behind, but you've got a sweet little 8-year-old on your hands. Catch us up to how Annabelle's doing.
Oh, she's a bundle of joy. She brings joy to everybody she meets, and but she has a full life, and there's a lot of things that she's getting to do that I don't think she would be doing otherwise. I mean, she's into swimming. She does pool therapy once a week usually, and she loves the water. Anytime she can be in water, she's happy. She does horseback riding as a therapy as well, but again, she gets to ride horses. And then recently she's been doing this baseball league, and so she gets to go out there and play baseball for the Pirates. So
I was going to say, we need to add that journey, that piece of the puzzle. She gets to play for the Pirates. I love it.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Miracle League is the organization for any listeners looking. Look up Miracle League. They're a fantastic special needs baseball team organization. Super fun for the kids, and no experience required. And she loves puzzle, and she's super social, very extroverted. So she loves school and church and just being around people and going to lunch parties, dinner parties, like wherever she can be around people.
That's awesome.
Sure.
I mean, I feel like you guys just listed off like 8 or 10 things that she's doing, that she's involved with, that you're getting her all kinds of, therapies and opportunities and stuff like that. And you guys are definitely a great example of parents that are focusing on what your child can do and, not just necessarily looking at their limitations. Like, how have you both been able to champion Annabelle's skills and focus on her strengths throughout her life?
Well, I mean, I think that, for us, it's been, trying to find out, like, what is us, like, what's us as a family, and how does that look? Because it looks different. I think we struggled at the beginning to figure out, okay, well, how do we do this? Well, it doesn't fit in this box. And some of those limitations, we looked at, the last diagnosis that we get, or the most recent one, I guess, is autism. And so, and so that one is, again, a whole nother avenue. Like we were getting the medical thing down pretty good. And then all of a sudden autism happened. And then it's like that's a whole nother avenue of behavior. I mean, it's a little different than medical because it's more behavior. And so it's just a whole nother avenue of resources to look into and get. And, but I think the key there though is accepting that and accepting those things and accepting those diagnoses, because when you do that, you're now opening yourself to other sources and resources that are out there. And that's because there's no way in the world we would have found out about the Miracle League Baseball. There's no way we would have gotten plugged into pool therapy. There's no way we would have gotten plugged into horse therapy if we had just kept trying to do this on our own and just focus on the little things here and there that we're trying to get her to do. And instead of embracing those things and saying, okay, this is what she can do, but this is what she needs. And we're going to get her these resources. And then being connected and being open to other families and, being part of different groups and community groups and within this whole journey here. I mean, we've met all kinds of families, whether it be through Ron McDonald House when we stay there and we're in the hospital, even families that we meet and follow, just like you guys in the hospital. And and it's those families that you begin to learn and you can ask questions. And locally, again, you've got, there's autism groups that we're a part of. Well, we find out all kinds of things that we could do there, resources, and even just events even. We've gotten to take her to all kinds of events even with like the Science Center or like or an amusement park or just different things like that they have for sensory seeking kids. And so again, it's just those things allow us to be able to give her that, just be a kid. And and again, we feel accepted in those areas. And at the same time, and even when we're not in those particular environments, it's what I always say is this is us. So
that's his new slogan.
And I'm proud of it,
Absolutely.
And, it's just like, this is us. We're different. When we come into a situation or just a group of people, it's just kind of like, this is different. But to me, it's like, I wouldn't have it any other way. We wouldn't have it any other way. And this is all we know. We don't know any different, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And so I personally like it. I think that this is, I'm happy with the way things are and the way she is. And this is our family. I mean, it's different.
But that's not to say that we started there. I mean, there definitely is a grieving process, but I think when you allow yourself to feel those feelings, to grieve those diagnoses, but then don't sit there, and I think what he was saying about, letting the diagnosis, I know for a long time, I did not want to get Annabelle evaluated for autism because I was like, I just can't take one more thing. But once we did get her evaluated and we started ABA therapy, which has been huge for her and her behaviors, I wish I had done it sooner. And I don't even remember who told me, but I've come to learn that the diagnosis does not make the child. The diagnosis is just a means to open more doors. And so it is okay. Like, getting that label does not change anything about who your child is or who God made her to be. Like, she is still Annabelle is still Annabelle. It doesn't matter that she has this autism label or this propionic acidemia label or this liver transplant label or all the labels she has. She's still the same person. And if we have to add on 10 more diagnoses to get her what she needs, the therapies to help her be the best that she can be, then that's what we'll do. But I mean, it's still okay to grieve, but you just can't stay there. You have to eventually accept it and say, like you said, like, this is us. We're just different, and that's okay.
Well, another thing too, to go with champion those skills, and you also have to be an advocate, and you can't just sit back and just assume that the professionals or the leaders of that, whatever that case may be, whatever that is, you can't just sit back and think that, okay, they're just doing what they need to do and they're doing all they can. Like, you've got to be in there and active in those therapy sessions. Like, you can't just, okay, well, this person's doing it, I'm just trusting that they're doing what they're supposed to, and then have a hands-off approach. I mean, you have to be in there with it and know what they're doing so you can keep working on it outside of session. And but you have to advocate for your child for what they need and go after those resources. And even in the hospital or even from a medical side, I mean, we've had to several times advocate that this is not right. Like, this blood level right here, there's something else to this. We need this to be checked a little bit deeper, and sure enough, like, we've found things here and there that the doctors hadn't really seen.
Most recently, the anemia stuff, and so that's because we kept asking, like, why are these levels off? Why is this trending down? And that's the other thing, is that it's okay, like, to love your team and still not agree with your team sometimes. And there have been times we've done that. Like, there have been times we have been upset with our team or not happy with the decision that they made, and you're still your child. Your child the best. You can be your child's best advocate. At the end of the day, you can still, respect your doctors and trust their opinions, but it is okay to advocate and voice, like, let's try something different, or I don't necessarily, can we compromise here?
Right. Well, along the theme of advocacy, my next question, I've got one specific question for Mike and one specific for Charity right here. But, for those that are listening, Mike is a diehard football guy. We root for different teams, but he's a coach, he's a teacher. And I'm always blessed when I see dads that are, like, right there with their kids. Dads that are teaming up with the mom and both partners advocating. I mean, you've got a busy schedule, especially at this time of year. We're recording the podcast in the fall when it's football season. How have you been able to manage your schedule, Mike, as a coach, as a teacher, to be super involved in family life and also Annabelle's care?
Yeah, I just try to guard the time when I'm away from the school. If I'm away from there and I come home, I don't bring stuff home with me. Now, I have to kind of watch film and stuff like that on the weekends. But again, stuff like that, I try to, like, I might get up early in the morning before everybody else gets up. And that's just a sacrifice I think I have to make. And then, if, when they go to bed, or if they're out if everybody's just kind of hanging out and not really doing anything, I might work a little bit then. But I try to sit down on the couch with them. I try to be in the same room with them. And, but I try to keep that stuff I try to leave it at work. And so when I do come home, I can give full attention to them. And then when I come home, I just try to help as much as I can. So I try to take as much burden off as I can from Charity. Anything that she can, just something that, even if it's just some chore that she doesn't really care for, I might pick up that chore. Or, with Annabelle, if maybe she just needs a break, just to rest for a little bit. And a lot of times I'll go take Annabelle outside and we'll do chalk on the driveway, or I'll take her out to the backyard and we'll go swing. So we have those moments like that, but I try to cherish those things, and I try to just be very intentional when I am there. And, but again, I also have to say no. There's things that I say no, like at work and that kind of thing, just not take on more and more responsibility. And I'm also very fortunate too to have people that I work for, I can say, all right, Annabelle's
Mm-hmm.
got this. All right, they're good if I leave and take care of
Mm-hmm.
that. And so, and I'm very cautious before if I were to take another job or go somewhere else, like that's just part of it. Like I'm like, again, this
Right.
is us. Like this is my life. You're going to be okay with
Mm-hmm.
that. But we schedule our trips and everything when I'm off. And also try to take on things that I can take on, like the little things, even if it's something small. Like for example, CVS Specialty, we get our anti-rejection med from. Well, you
Sure.
got to go online and sometimes talk to them over the phone and get things coordinated because sometimes her lab scripts get kind of messed up sometimes and
Yeah.
because they change so much, and so to do that, and so that's just something that I just took on. I just took on the CVS Specialty, and like I deal with all of that. Anytime she needs it refilled, she just texts me, and then I get it
Yeah.
done, and then like at the time we were like something like the dentist, for example, something that we might do, not routine, but just kind of every once in a while. Just one less thing that Cherry's got to take. I'll just set up the appointments, and if I can, I try to set up a time when I can take her, and just stuff
Yeah.
like that. Because Cherry takes care of most of the day to day stuff, and so if
Sure.
there's something like that I can take care of, I usually do that. But again, like I said,
Mm-hmm.
it's just I take advantage of every opportunity. Try to go
Yeah.
anytime there's a family thing. Like I'm there. Like I
That's
drop
good.
whatever it is I'm doing to make sure I'm there. And I would say
That's good.
too. I mean, I have to kind of let things go too. I mean, there's a lot of house projects. There's a lot of things I need to be doing when I am off. But sometimes
Mm-hmm.
those are things that are just going to be put on the back burner, and I'll get to them when I can because this is just more important.
Yeah, 100%. I think that those are wise words for a lot of dads out there that want to advocate and that want to be involved. So thanks for setting that example.
Yeah.
Charity from your point of view, Mike said, you're more the day to day. And I know that you've helped my wife Reagan with a lot of different resources and things over the years. I remember when she was first making the hospital packing checklists and you were like, oh, these are some specific things regarding the Ronald McDonald House, and whether it's dosing meds or how to clean syringes, or I know you guys have had dozens and dozens and dozens of conversations over the years. So I'm hopeful that maybe you can share some of those tips and tricks, maybe a few things with transplant moms, dads, caregivers out there of like, oh, here's a few things that have really worked for me in transplant care.
Yeah. So Annabelle's, she's pretty complex. So even to this day, we're 7 years out from transplant, and she still has 14 syringes a day of meds and 2 capsules by mouth that
Yeah.
she takes, and 3 tube feeds. So I guess the easiest thing that has worked for us is we do draw her, and some medical professionals listening may not always agree with this, but we do draw her meds up a week at a time. Her nurse and I lay out all the syringes, and then
Okay.
we have little bins and we put all her meds, and then I have these cosmetic bags for each med time that are different colors, and
Okay.
those bags have labels of like what meds she gets at what time. So even someone who's working with Annabelle, that like grandparents that may not be as comfortable with the day to day, they can just pull those syringes out from the bins and put them in the appropriate med bags. Or we have the med
Nice.
bags already done. Or even when we travel, we can just put them all for those specific times and just grab those med bags. Trying to think what else. What I had put on here, the biggest tip that I have from being like a day-to-day manager for this many years of her
Yeah.
care is burnout is real, and do not be
Mm,
afraid to ask for help.
that's good.
We have a nurse that works for us that's been with us 5 years. She's amazing, Nurse Lisa. She's works for us Monday through Friday, goes to school with Annabelle, and helps me with a lot of the day to day of washing up the syringes, making formula in the evenings before she leaves her shift. That is such a huge help. I think when you're first into either the transplant journey or any medically complex journey, I think at the beginning you're like, oh, I got this. And you just really live on adrenaline and living in
Mm-hmm.
survival mode.
Yeah.
But several years in, we finally gotten to the point where we're like, okay, burnout is real. And yes,
Mm-hmm.
Annabelle's care is not hard. She gets, a couple tube feeds, like one right at bedtime and then one early in the morning. And they're not hard and they're not even that long. But when you do it day in and day out for
Sure.
8 years, it kind of wears on you because you're like, this is up to me. I can't not forget. Like, I can't not do this. Like, it
Right.
has to be done. This child, a kid like ours that have metabolic disorders, they can't fast very long. They can't go
Right.
without food that long.
Mm-hmm.
So it's taking, not not being afraid to ask for help or having night nurses. Some people are so like, oh, I don't want to have someone in my home. Well, having someone in our home, even though, yes, during the summer when we're all here together, it can really be a lot. But at the same time, taking that burden off of us to where we can get rest. We even had one of my former students is a nurse that works for us occasionally, and she came even this evening before this podcast and came for a few hours, and Mike and I were able to take a nap for a couple hours and then go out to eat, and just having those breaks to where you can feel, I guess, I don't want to say feel human again, but kind of feel a little normal, I guess.
Yeah.
It's huge. And that's okay if you need to ask for help and need to have nursing in your home. It can be a blessing for sure.
Don't be afraid to ask for help. That is not showing weakness. It is just simply being human. I love that.
Hey everyone, I'm Olivia Reeder, and I love helping my parents serve hospitalized families through our Pressing On programs. Here at Pressing On, we're committed to meeting tangible needs, and we have various programs that help resource hospitalized families physically, emotionally, and spiritually, including our Hospital Care Package program, Transplant Backpack program, Gas Card program, Crisis Coaching program, and Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh program. So if you or a family you know is affected by a long-term hospitalization or is on the journey of pediatric transplant, we'd love to come alongside you with free resources during this time. Let me encourage you to visit our website at pressingon.org to sign up for our free resources or make a referral to one of our programs. Visit pressingon.org today. Thanks so much.
I'd love to ask you guys, some specific advice maybe that you would give to parents that are on that transplant journey before, during, and after. But before we get there, because that's going to be one of our closing questions, I'd like to see if you guys are up for our rapid fire round where we ask you several fun questions just to get to know you as individuals. Is that cool with you guys?
Yeah.
All
right. Awesome. So one of the things that I love is that when families are on the transplant journey and they come to Pittsburgh, that there's different things in Pittsburgh that they fall in love with. And you guys are a great example of, at least from what I can gather from most of our conversations, you guys do like the city of Pittsburgh. But what are your favorite things to do when you're in Pittsburgh?
Oh yeah, we love Pittsburgh. We've become like honorary Pittsburghese people.
Yes, Yinzers.
Now.
Welcome.
So yes, we are Yinzers, sort of. We say y'all still, but also Yinzers. Well, Pamela's is probably our number one. We always have to eat at Pamela's, and no diner will ever compare, in our opinion. Nothing compares down here in North Carolina to Pamela's. Their Pittsburgh hash and their hotcakes.
My favorite is Propionic Brothers.
Yes.
You could never go wrong with that. I've got to have my fix for that every time I come.
In Iron City.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
even though it's really not that good, but it has that Pittsburgh taste to it.
Well, they say at Propionics that, their number 2 bestseller is like one of the sandwiches because Iron City is their number 1 bestseller. But yeah, anybody that comes to Pittsburgh for a weekend, I mean, if you go to Pamela's and Propionics, you're doing pretty well. So
yeah. Well, not only that, but like Annabelle has to ride the Duquesne Incline, so we definitely do that.
Oh, nice.
So that's, there's always at least 1 or 2 of those trips up and down the mountain there. But then she likes to go to Kennywood, so and before that it was Idlewild, and so but now she's got a little bit bigger. Kennywood has been the place, and so she loves Kennywood. So we always make a point to go to Kennywood. And this past time though, we went to the water steps. If you go there in the summertime, that was actually I think she enjoyed that pretty good.
And I enjoyed the views. It was beautiful.
So
right there on the North Shore,
And you got to have pierogies. You got to make sure you have pierogies. We really like the appetizer pierogies at Fatheads, and that's kind of our go-to there for that.
Yep.
So,
man, you're just hitting all the places right here in a matter of a minute. This is awesome.
Yeah.
We'll have to clip this and make it go for it if you got other recommendations.
I was going to say the UPMC gift shop for Annabelle.
Yeah, Annabelle likes that one.
Well, I love all of those. As far as you guys as a family, here's the next question. What's the favorite snack that can always be found at your house?
Cheese and popcorn.
So block cheese of some sort, or like spreadable cheese and crackers. And
then
yeah, popcorn, bag popcorn. Just
Do you have a favorite type of cheese? Is there a favorite type of cheese that you can find in your house?
I like pepper jack. A little bit of
Nice.
spice.
I like sharp cheddar.
Love it. Love it. This is more of a serious question, but what are you guys most proud of Annabelle for?
Well, you go ahead.
Just her resiliency.
Hmm.
She just always takes everything in stride when we have
Yeah.
any type of medical anything. Even this past week, she was very anxious about getting her flu shot. And in the past, we've always had to pin her down. And this year, she decided she wanted to sit in the chair and be a big girl. And she's just like that. And she doesn't mind blood work and IVs and actually kind of likes going to the hospital, which is sad,
Wow.
but also comforting for parents, because any parents who have spent time in the hospital, it just, it's so hard on your heart when your kid is screaming and crying. And when they finally get to the age where they can handle it, it does make hospitalizations a lot easier. And she's gotten to that point where she's just like, she goes to blood work and she's like, right here, that's where I want it.
Wow.
And doesn't cry, just watches for the IVs. Does a lot of her pretend play is medical related, but she's just very resilient and doesn't let anything knock her down ever.
I'd say
beautiful.
for me, I would say just the joy that she brings to everybody. Like everybody she comes in contact with, every person that works with her, they just fall in love with her. She's just got a great personality. She can be opinionated at times, but at the same time, she can be very silly and just full of joy, like I said. And so, she's just a blessing to everybody she comes in contact with. And I think that God's using her story to reach others. I mean, it's very impactful for other people that just follow her at all. So that's what I'm probably most proud of.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I mean, you mentioned that word resilience. And so this is a question that I ask every guest of the podcast, very similar to resilience, but what does the word perseverance mean to you?
For me, it is just continuing on and enduring. And, and I think of James 1, 2, and 3 for me. It's like, and I think one translation it says, consider it all joy. Or another translation, count it all joy. And sometimes it's hard to count this joy. This journey, in the moment, you don't say joy. But looking back on it, those things make you stronger in the end, and it gives you endurance, which will eventually lead to steadfastness. And so for me, it's for my journey, and I think for Charity's journey, is God has continued to, not like, I mean, we've been stretched. I mean, in these moments in the hospital, you will be stretched to the point to where you think, okay, I can't do this anymore. And I can't do another day in the PICU, or I can't do another day in the emergency room. And then it's that moment when you get moved to the next floor. And then it's like, okay, now I can do this. And then you reach another point where it's like, okay, it's time to go. And but every time we make it to that point, and God doesn't give you anything more than you can't handle, and but you will be stretched, but at the same time, that's grown our faith, and it's grown us as a family. I think some of our when we look back, some of our best times as a couple in our marriage that has strengthened our marriage is actually in some of those hardest moments where we didn't have anything. Like, we just had each other to depend on in that moment to hold on to. Or if we're in Pittsburgh and it's just us two. And when we were at Duke for those 3 weeks, it was just us two. And we had really hard days, and we would come back and we were just spent. And the only thing we could lean on was each other, and then just pouring out to God, but God would answer the next day. And when we didn't think we could do it anymore, we had the strength. And so I think that for us, I think that's it. I think it's continuing on. And I know you asked earlier, what did God do beforehand? And one of my life verses is Ephesians 2:10, that we are His workmanship, and that He has prepared us for good works. And this is the good work. This is what He has prepared us to do. and all those little things throughout our life, it has led us to
Mm-hmm.
this. And, and we, even looking back, I don't know how we did it.
Yeah.
But we did. And, and it's also funny too, because you also asked like when we met, our first date, the verse that I gave her when we first met was Hebrews 12, 1 and 2. And that's actually what's on our engraved on our wedding bands.
Mm-hmm.
And
Nice.
so this journey that we're on,
Mm-hmm.
that's we
The
did
race.
I didn't yeah this journey, this race that we're on, that's been set before us. It's like, I didn't know that right now. I didn't know
Yeah.
that this was going to be our journey. I
Mm-hmm.
thought it was going to look a little bit more like,
Traditional.
yeah, and it didn't.
Yeah.
But I think in order to get through that, you've got to have people around you. You got to have the community of people that will help you and help you alongside. And I know there's some days where I'm down, but she's up. There's days where she's
Mm-hmm.
up or down and I'm up. And so it's those moments when we need each other. You constantly have to lean on each other, and we're not in it alone. And
Mm-hmm.
but that's what, we just take it one day at a time, and then over time, it's just we look back and there's some sweet moments there
Mm-hmm.
I
in the midst
appreciate you
of all
sharing that.
that.
I think as we look back, I mean, this has been a really, really helpful and fruitful conversation, and I'd encourage any listener, that is on the journey of transplant to really pay attention to a lot of the things that Mike and Charity have shared tonight. But in closing, like, what specific advice would you guys give, to families that are on the journey of transplant, whether they're listed, they're currently in the hospital, whether they're caring for their child at home, and then maybe also share if there's, some specific resources that have helped you guys along the way. You mentioned a couple of groups, throughout our conversation here, but it could be a group or an article or a podcast or a conference you attended. But, maybe in closing, share some advice for other transplant families.
Well, I mean, I would say go ahead and prepare now. If you're waiting for the call, make sure you have a backpack. Make sure you go through and start thinking. Okay, plan for long term. Plan for several
Mm-hmm.
months. Don't plan for like 2 or 3 weeks, and
Right.
plan for several months, and have things worked out that you need to get you through those months, and prepare for that.
Yeah, and I would say, this doesn't sound super hopeful and encouraging, but like we were talking about earlier, I think you should go in expecting problems and complications. Don't expect it to all be
Sure.
like rainbows and unicorns. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
not going to be it's not going to be a fix all, and it's also going to be transplant is a marathon. It is not a sprint, and it's going to be ongoing for life. There's going to be
Mm-hmm.
constant management, and you just hope that the benefits far outweigh the risk, which in our case it did. Like ours is constant blood work and managing and balancing medications. But I would
Sure.
much rather take that than constant hospitalizations like she used to be. And
Yeah.
like she would always be in the hospital. And so our day-to-day life is still a lot of management from the transplant, a lot of medications, a lot of blood work, but we don't live in the hospital, and we're grateful for that. So that would be, and then our biggest advice is probably, especially when you're in the thick of that first year of transplant or right after surgery, is like just taking it one day at a time. What
Mm.
is the issue that I have to focus on today? What is our
Yeah.
main problem? We're not going to worry about like how long are we going to be on steroids, or how long are we going to be on this medication or this medication. It's one day at a time, just one day at a time.
But I also say too, when you are in the hospital and you are in that, there's times where you just gotta sometimes just laugh, and there's things that are gonna happen. The nurses are gonna do something, the doctors are gonna do something, and sometimes you just gotta laugh. And so there's times where you know I just say hashtag hospital life,
Yeah.
Yep.
and we
Yep.
just make a comment, and we have these inside jokes, and if a resident or somebody comes in, like we can just look at each other and just start laughing, and
Yep.
we just have
Yeah.
find the humor in things too. I mean,
Mm.
um,
Yeah. And
it's
there was something else I was going to say. Now I can't remember. Oh, and the biggest piece of advice I have is make sure you always bring your medications with you to the hospital. Just make sure you
Yes.
always bring your medications to the hospital.
Yes.
because we did have a trip. This was part of our crazy roller coaster journey, is that we had, when we had gotten home from Pittsburgh on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, on Thanksgiving Day, Annabelle spiked a really high fever. Some really bad things happened. Anyway, she had to be life flighted back to Pittsburgh after we had been home less than 48 hours. And we had not even unpacked from being back home from Pittsburgh. And we had just gotten a lot of her meds refilled. And so when I was trying to really quickly just pack up what could we use for just a week or something, just enough to like get us through, a couple of things of clothes that we could rewash over and over. But I didn't bring her meds because I was like, oh, well, they'll have those in the hospital. And then we ended up having to stay like even after we got discharged from the hospital, they wanted us to stay at their Ronald McDonald house a few days later. And I didn't have our meds. So, and our, the nurse practitioner on the floor had to spend hours on the phone with our insurance company to try to explain to them why we needed medications that we had just gotten refilled because we were in Pennsylvania and our meds were in North Carolina. So always take your meds with you to the
Great
the
piece of
hospital.
advice. Seemingly simplistic, but for us transplant families, we got to remember 100 things. So yeah, very, very understandable as well. In closing, you guys mentioned a few things that we'll link to in the short show notes. I mean, you mentioned the Ronald McDonald House, you mentioned the Propionic Acidemia Society, you mentioned, let's see, there were several different things here that I noted. You mentioned the Miracle League. Are there any other groups that you found helpful to be a part of in your journey that we haven't covered already?
It's different in every state or even every section of a country, but like parent to parent support networks, are good resources to find like support groups. Those have been helpful for me to connect with other special needs moms, in the area. And then, trying to think what else. Do you have anything else, Mike?
Do you want to talk about that?
Well, I know for resources for me is just finding, a good Christian counselor, that has helped me process. Medical trauma is a very, very real thing that most people think. Yeah, PTSD is a real thing in the medical world.
Absolutely.
And there's not a year that goes by on September 23rd, which was Annabelle's crisis day, that I don't feel this dark heaviness over me. And it's taken a lot of therapy and I'm still processing it, still working with my counselor to process that. And it's okay to get help and process that because it is trauma.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, I appreciate you guys sharing that. I mean, Mike and Charity, not only you guys good friends, just really want to affirm your journey and being a model of perseverance for not only our family, but also for everybody who's listening. If somebody is intrigued by your story and they want to follow along, is there a good way to follow Annabelle's journey online or follow you guys these days?
Yeah, I mean, they can look us up on Facebook if they want, but Annabelle does have her own Facebook page. It's COTA, COTA, for Annabelle GM, for Grace McKinney. We don't update it as much as we used to right after her transplant journey, but I do post some pictures here and there, or if we're in the hospital, things like that.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys once again for being honest and real and vulnerable and sharing lots of tips and insights for transplant families. Just really want to affirm you guys and thankful for all that you shared. Really appreciate you guys joining the podcast.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to the Pressing On podcast. If you found this episode inspiring and helpful in your journey of perseverance, we appreciate you sharing it with others. A great way to support our work of serving hospitalized families is sharing the podcast with family and friends, posting about it on social media, or leaving us a rating and review. Don't forget to visit our website at pressingon.org for our free programs and resources for hospitalized families. Follow along the Pressing On journey on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Pressing On PGH. As we all press on through healthcare challenges, we need to stick together. Until next time, know that you are not alone. You are seen, valued, and loved. Keep pressing on.